Welcome to my second video in the second chapter for the ActionRPG project. And in this video, we're going to create the prefab for the player slashing attack. And so that's going to start with us needing to load in the graphics to do the slash attack. Right now, I'm not planning on loading it from a sprite sheet, although we will look at loading some other effects from sprite sheets later on. And I do also want to at least point out that if you do work in Photoshop, Unity can actually load Photoshop files as texture files. However, Unity doesn't directly support accessing different layers. So if you actually open this Photoshop file up, you'll see that the sword slash is on 3 different layers. By default, Unity does not support layers, but you can access the layers through the scripting system. However, it is not the preferred way to do it. Just make a sprite sheet. So we're going to drag and drop these slashes in, which means I'm going to want to create a new folder for my textures player. And I've got the ActionRPG sprites right there. Maybe I'll make another folder inside of here called attacks. And I'll put the different graphic files pertaining to all my different player attacks inside of there. So let's drag and drop these 3 slashes into my attacks folder. And you can see that they load /1, /2, /3. And so we don't need to drag anything else in. So we're done with that. Now these do require a little bit of setting up. So if you look at the sprite, it's not really designed to necessarily be the center being the pivot. I'm going to change the pivot on these. So we're going to select all 3 of them. And first up, the pixels per unit. This is going to be 64. We can tweak that to see if we like it. And then the pivot, instead of pivoting off the center, we're going to pivot off the left. This isn't going to be the most graceful sword slash, but what's going to happen is that we're just going to spawn it and we'll rotate it based on the direction the player is facing when they attack. And we'll be able to see that once we start building the object. All right. And then let's set the filter mode to point. And then we can hit apply, and all 3 of these files should change. So all 3 of them are now 64s. They're also single sprites, meaning we don't really need to do the slicing of the sprite inside of here because they are all separate graphics. But you can actually see the pivot right here on the left side. That's going to be the point of rotation for these, and also the point where these things are considered to be centered at. So when it spawns in, the center, in air quotes, of this graphic is considered to be this knob right here, which will be very convenient because then if we rotate it, if we need it to be attacking up, we'll just rotate it 90 degrees and do that. All right, so we've got those. Now let's start building an object to build in the animation for this sword slash and then just start setting it up. So I want to create a new empty object and I'll call it sword or sword slash. I'm going to reset the transform. Then let's give it a component of a sprite renderer, if I can find that. Rendering sprite renderer. And just for the sake of giving it a sprite, I'm just going to give it the /1 sprite. We can see it appearing right there. Not going to really change much of this other stuff inside of the scripting for it. We will be dealing with the order inside the layer so that it appears appropriately on top of things. But we want to give it some animation. So we're going to want to bring open the window animation panel. And to begin animating sword slash, create an animator and an animation clip. So let's click create. And I don't want to just throw it inside the player directory. I'm going to make a new subfolder inside of here called sword. And I will call this sword slash. And from here, I can play with the settings to get it to be something that I would want. So let's go with, for now, maybe about 12. and we want to bring in /1, /2. Now /2, let's bring it in at the 03 mark, and then /3, we'll bring in equidistant from there, so it's got 2 ticks, bringing it in at 6. I do want to add a ending, so I'm going to right click up here for an animation event at 9. That's going to be the thing that we send to say destroy this animation. So let's see how this looks if we hit play, and if we think that looks good enough. If not, we can try to speed it up by bringing these in. So bringing them in 2 units. And maybe we'll keep that. Well, we can kind of decide from there. Though there is a cool thing I want to point out about the animator. If you're resizing a lot of these things, there is a thing in a setting called ripple that if I turn on ripple and I move this, notice how it also pushes the other keyframes back. It keeps that kind of same distance, and if I push this in, it keeps that same distance. As opposed to if I turn off ripple, you can see how it's not pushing the keyframes behind it. So just kind of a neat thing if you are doing a more complex animation or working with a more elaborate animation. But we can always tweak this once the game starts, once we start getting actual combat, and if we feel like this doesn't look right, we can always play with it. And so that's what I have the longest one slightly longer. It sticks around slightly longer. So with that, I'm going to hit the play button. And so this // we have started it. We've got an animator working well. We don't need to do really anything with this because it's going to just delete itself once it finishes. It could be worth our while to disable looping. I don't think we really get much choice in that. I think we have to do that through the animation. So let's go back to here. If we uncheck loop time, it shouldn't loop. So if we bring back, I think the animator may, no, actually I don't think it will. So if I bring back the animation here and I hit play, that's going to reanimate it. But when we actually hit play in the game world, you can see that it's not continuing the animation. If we would have had that selected, our / animation and include loop time, it will repeat forever. But again, that shouldn't really even be an issue because we are going to be deleting it the moment it finishes its animation. So that's kind of up to you if you really want to turn that off or on. I'm going to turn it off because this animation shouldn't repeat. That's going to look horrible if it did. And so while we're here, let's begin setting up the colliders and get this ready to spawn. So the collider that we're going to want for this is going to actually probably be a capsule collider. So let's go to Components, Physics 2D, Capsule Collider. Now, could we do like a polygon collider? Yeah, if we wanted to try to get this exact, there's no harm in choosing polygon collider, and I think that's perfectly acceptable for what we're trying to do. We can do a capsule collider. So with this capsule collider, I'm going to need to shrink it down a bit. So let's drop the size. Forgot that one of them has to be bigger than the other. So it looks like I probably want to switch it to be a horizontal collider, meaning that needs to be bigger there. I'm going to open up the edit tool for this collider and just kind of start shrinking in here, shrinking this, bringing that up a little bit, and closing that out. So that would be the size of my hitbox. So it's up to you if you want to use a capsule collider or if you want to do the polygon collider. I think this will be fine. It's just a nice simple shape. That should work. Now we do want to make sure we check is trigger, because this shouldn't be something that pushes things around physically. It's just going to be a sensor box that will activate when it hits something. And so that's really the last thing we need to do with this before we get into scripting it. So just to kind of see what it would look like, if we line it up towards the center of the player, so the player's center there, so like when it spawns, it's going to spawn, if we're attacking in that direction, it's going to spawn there. And what we're going to do is just rotate it. So it's not the most beautiful approach, but if we wanted to have an attack appearing like in that direction, that's what we're going to do when we spawn it, is just kind of rotate it in. So that's why we have it set up with that left, the pivot being on the left, because then it lets us do that for our rotation. If we had more graphics, obviously it would be better just to have a different graphic for the sword attack in each direction, but I don't have the graphics for all that. So I'm just going to have to do the best I can with this single animation. I'm going to drop its position back to 0, 0 before I turn it into a prefab. So it's going to just get dragged and dropped into the prefabs player folder, and now the sword slash is a prefab. And I'm going to delete it out of the scene. So it's ready to be spawned with scripts. And I think that's where we're going to stop this here, because we've got our sword slash working. Yes, we do have some errors here. Sword slash animation event has no function name selected. That's because I haven't set up the script to handle and receive the messages sent by the animation window. So we will be returning back to this window to take a look at rigging this thing, because right now there is no function being selected. That's the error. And so we are going to return to that very shortly. So we will do the coding for the player's attack inside the third video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you then.